1989's Robot Ninja sees a bit of a shift in production quality for Mr. Bookwalter. Whereas The Dead Next Door was predominantly shot on Super 8 film and was somewhat limited by being a fairly early entry in JR's career, Robot Ninja would get a bit of a cosmetic boost. For starters, this movie was shot with the intention of being a direct-to-video feature, and as such there were some standards that needed to be met in order for that to be a realistic achievement. For starters, this had to be shot on 16mm film, in order for it to output to VHS in any kind of meaningfully high quality way. At nearly double the resolution to his previous film, shooting on 16mm genuinely saved this movie quality-wise, as will become apparent later on. This was only Bookwalter's second ever feature, and it's clear he learned a lot from shooting The Dead Next Door, as everything here appears to get a bit of a bump in quality. From the direction to the cine to even the practical effects, it's very much a film that feels like a director on the grow. The plot of the film probably borrows more from Batman than anything else, but to a 21st century audience I would personally say it had very strong Kick-Ass vibes. The film was set in suburban Ohio and follows Lenny, a comic book artist turned actor who's the creator of Robot Ninja, a comic book series that made the leap to TV with mixed results. The network execs want the show to be more in line with Batman 66 than anything else, whereas Lenny wants to go to more darker, moodier places with the character. The network's reluctant, and this frustrates Lenny to the point that he basically has to try and strong-arm his bosses at the comic book company to try and tone down the campiness, much to their annoyance. Anyway, while heading home one night from a taping of Robot Ninja, Lenny stumbles on a street gang raping a young couple. He tries to intervene to save the couple, but ends up seriously injured and the young couple are killed. This triggers something off in Lenny's mind, and he starts to consider the possibility that the world may need a real Robot Ninja to help save the day. So, when he gets out of the hospital, he goes to see his friend Doc Goodnight, an inventor, with a fairly simple request. Using the comic book designs for reference, could Doc craft him a super badass real-life robot ninja suit? Doc, while reluctant, says that he can. And so we begin a most excellent construction and training montage, as we cut between Doc constructing Lenny's suit and Lenny working out and working on a super bleak edition of his Robot Ninja comics. After a short time, Doc's work is done, and he's done a hell of a job. Lenny's Robot Ninja suit comes complete with steel face mask, a night vision visor with built-in voice changer, chest and plate armour, and some seriously rad 14-inch claws. Lenny's delighted and suits up and heads out, but Doc's a little concerned. And he rightfully should be, as Lenny's effectively decided to bring justice to the streets as Robot Ninja. He tracks the gang who attacked him and the young couple down, and within a few minutes he's offed one of them in a particularly grisly manner, but just as he's getting ready for round two, the police begin to arrive, causing the gang to split and Lenny to try and escape before he's caught. The next day, Doc turns up at Lenny's apartment, seriously pissed off, wanting to know what the hell happened the night previously. More pressingly, he wants the suit back. Lenny basically shoves him out of the way and tells Doc that what he's doing is for the greater good, before heading out again for another night of vigilante justice. But this time things don't quite go to plan again. After another altercation, another member of the gang is disposed of. But in the fight, Lenny gets hurt pretty bad. The gang swear vengeance on Robot Ninja, but again, they have to flee when they hear the police coming. Lenny, basically on the verge of death, manages to clamber into his car and head over to Doc's house. Doc's not in, so Lenny uses the time to do some really weird shit with some plastic tubing to his arm. While he's trying to fix himself up, he switches on the news and finds that the media are blaming Robot Ninja for all the murders. Which, I mean, he did do some of them, but they were bad guys, and he didn't even kill any of the good guys. Anyway, Lenny heads back to his apartment after the police spook him again, and once inside he pretty much instantly passes out due to exhaustion and blood loss. And it's from here that the film enters its final act, As Doc finally returns home to find his lab destroyed and covered in blood and the gang literally waiting on his doorstep. You see, it turns out after the altercation the night before, they tailed Lenny back to Doc's house, and when Lenny finds out what the gang have done to Doc, it leads to a final showdown to try and bring peace to the streets. In a hell of a climactic finale that makes Braindead look like Benji in terms of the amount of blood on display, this is one you really don't want to miss. Initially, I was super skeptical about this movie going in. I mean, I was under the impression that I was going into a good bad movie, but I've been burnt too many times before by low, no-budget productions from the late 80s and early 90s, and I was a little concerned that what I was getting myself into might reek of mediocrity. But you know what? This film's bloody good fun. I was genuinely surprised by how entertaining it was, especially after the director himself basically said the film was an embarrassment. I was genuinely expecting to spend 80-ish minutes sighing through a padded mess, and I really couldn't have been further off base if I tried. It's ace. I'll get one of my biggest grievances out of the way from the top. The script is a bit of a game of two halves. The plot itself is great for the time it was made. While it may not have been the most original idea for the world of comic books, to see a vigilante comic book movie get made in 1989 before Tim Burton's Batman, which was just around the corner when this film was shot, was actually quite impressive. To see this kind of thing tackled in a non-Burton-esque manner was honestly quite refreshing. It'd be a good at least 5 to 10 years before similar subversive comic book movies like Mystery Men and Orgasmo would be released, so in that regard it's really good fun. It's super zippy as well, all lean, no fat. The film clocks in at around about an hour and 20-ish, and it's one of the few times I can say that I feel that a film ran to a near optimised runtime. The only grumble I can even begin to muster about the runtime is the opening titles and credits do go on for a little bit, and there's literally maybe a scene or two that could have been dropped or tightened up a tiny bit. But otherwise, you're looking at a very tight production here on the whole. The characters aren't exactly the most developed in the world, but the film gives you enough to work with to get along, and in a bit of a weird first for this channel, in the decades since this film's release, they've actually retroactively released supplementary material in the form of a comic book adaptation which helps flesh the characters out even more. The only real gripe I have with this script is the dialogue. Through a mixture of cast performance and what's clearly a writer in his early days of production, to me, the dialogue's just not particularly naturalistic. Now, I'm not saying that this film should have aimed for gritty realism or anything. It's clear that the dialogue is written in the style of comic book dialogue, and the delivery's been done in such a way to reflect that. Unfortunately, comic book dialogue tends to have a certain overblown grandness about it in terms of tone, and the cast here just can't quite get that tone right. It results in a bit of a miss on both counts, as the dialogue's full potential for me fails to be truly realised, and a load of the cast's performances get nerfed as a result. It's a real shame, as I think with just a hint more early-era trauma in its blood, this probably could have been able to ride that wave pretty decently. Instead, it just comes across as a bit awkward and stilted in places. Don't get me wrong, it has its moments. There are some amazingly bad deliveries that raised a chortle, but yeah, for the most part, it's not so good, Al. Direction 2 here is a bit of a game of two halves. In terms of stylisation and location direction, this film looks awesome. It reminds me quite a bit of early to mid-era Rick Sloane stuff. Everything's quite colourful, vivid and fast-paced. Bookwalter really uses his locations to their best effect, and it's a delight to see some nice experimentation of composition within the frame, as it really helps enlivening up what otherwise would have potentially been a quite dry set of sequences. I equally only have great things to say around his successful use of coloured lighting gels. It really helps make some of the more dialogue-heavy scenes pop, and it gives some colour to some of the fight sequences. It's just that little bit of extra creative involvement in the way of stylisation and comic book flair that really makes this thing stand out. While it may be the case that he does at times go a little overboard with the smoke machines in a sequence or two, I think I can forgive the movie for that minor misdemeanor. One of the only issues I really have on the direction front, unfortunately, lies with the direction of the cast, but here I think it's a bit more justified. My problem with this is that, well, they're all quite stiff. They don't come across to me as comfortable or natural on set. They don't seem to know in some scenes where to stand, what their positions need to be, what will or won't work on set. And I'm really trying to decide if this is down to a confidence issue on the part of an inexperienced cast, or just the early days of a director with inexperience working with a cast on the direction front. Frankly, it may even be a bit of both. I don't know. But there are times in the movie where the cast feel kind of painful in front of the lens, which, when coupled with the aforementioned dialogue issues, does create a bit of a clunky experience at times. At points in this it does work in a so bad it's good way, but it's inescapable to see what they were attempting to do and how they were maybe just half a click off sticking the landing on this. But from here on in, it's pretty much out and out positives. The cine is great with a wonderful range of experimental shot types that really try to make the film feel a lot grander and bigger budgeted than it probably was. The various colour gels really help to amp up the vibrance, and the decision to shoot most of the film dark has left this in its most recent Blu-ray iteration looking wonderfully moody, with some lovely shadowing contrasting the sharp, vivid colours to create a film that has a quite distinctive look and feel that I really dug. Equally, it can't go unmentioned that the practical effects in this are really quite excellent too. This is a very gory movie, with many anecdotes of the crew running out of fake blood and having to use everything from soap to motor oil to try and meet demand. There's so much blood tossed around in this thing that it genuinely caught me off guard, as most lower budgeted films in my experience either tend to skimp on the blood or cut away from it entirely. Do they look 100% realistic? Absolutely not. You can very clearly see the cuts in these. But in many ways, that doesn't really matter. To me, it really pulls it off in a grand and over-the-top way that, again, only mirrors some of the grittier 80s comic books it's attempting to imitate. The performances? Well, I think I've summed up their faults well enough previously, so let's look at their positives. Michael Todd is a really solid choice as Lenny in this. He's got just the right balance of pissed off and a justice complex to keep him both interesting and watchable. And Michael really clearly puts everything he can into his performance. He's a great leading man, and I think he was a great choice for the role. Equally, Maria Markovic is excellent as the female member of the gang, Godey. She's over the top, a little hammy at times, but has a real malevolence behind her performance. She's probably the best actor in this film in my opinion, and she's an utter delight to watch. The film also has cameos from Linnea Quigley and Burt Ward as the boss of the comic book company and his sexy secretary respectively. While it's nice to see some schlock acting royalty cameo here, I kinda feel they're a little bit surplus to requirements. They don't really do much. But they are big names, and that always helps to sell a film. So even if they don't do much, they're alright in this. The rest of the supporting cast? Well, they're a bit fair to middling. There are some okay performances here on the physical acting front, but the issue I've mentioned before seems to hit the supporting cast and extras more than anyone else. Like I say, I can see the tone they were aiming for here, but it's just about missing the mark slightly. Sometimes that works, other times it's a bit awkward and flat. The soundtrack? Jesus, it's great! It's late 80s cheapo synth and some semi-decent rock, and when I say cheapo synth, that's not an insult. It sounds a little on the cheap side, but there are some amazing tracks in this. It's super fast-paced, reeks of the 80s, and it suits the tone of the film perfectly. I really got on board with this score, and I really wish I'd picked up the physical release now, as that came with the option to buy the soundtrack alongside it. Robot Ninja was released in 1989 direct-to-video by Cinema Home Video, though frankly on the release front up until a couple of years ago it had an awful release history. So, the original negative was edited in a rush with a large number of print issues, including glue on some frames, some shots being accidentally jumbled up in a couple of scenes by accident, resulting in sequences that made no sense, and a couple of instances of crossfades being applied where cuts should have been. When it came out on home video, they botched the transfer, and as a result, all the colours got washed out and all the blacks got crushed within the picture quality, rendering most of the lovely Cinean direction looking quite frankly hideous and sickly. When it came to the remastering of this film, the original negative had been lost for quite some time, so they had to rely on a test print that had been struck which wasn't properly graded, effectively the copy used to dub the VHS version. And as a result, when the DVD came out in 2007, it basically looked like the VHS version, but a tiny bit sharper and with all the original flaws still intact. Finally, in the mid-2010s, a film laboratory in LA got in touch with David Dakota, one of the producers of this film, to inform him that a large number of films attached to him had been found during a clean-out, and Robot Ninja was one of the found films. It was returned to Buchwalter, who, given his experience as an editor, decided to remaster the film himself. He took a 2K scan of the negative and basically from the ground up restored and remastered the print to how it should have originally been presented had it been theatrically released. He also took the time to almost completely recreate the soundscape of this film, using higher quality, less compressed effects and modern audio engineering techniques, and using original promotional materials and scans of the comic art seen throughout the film. Him and a friend were able to create a new opening titles and credits. With the previous version being created using SD materials, it was unfortunately unsuitable for upscaling. He even went as far as to enhance some of the effects in the film, but he's done it in quite a tasteful way that isn't overly intrusive. It's a damn sight better than some of the improvements done to, say, The Warriors director's cut, thank you very much. Finally, the fully restored version was released via Tempe Films and distributed via Makeflix in 2019 on Blu-ray, DVD, on demand and VHS. And it looks gorgeous. It's packed with rafts of extras, including a remaster of the original 4:3 VHS presentation, commentaries, making-ofs, documentaries on the restoration of the film, and much, much more. It's the most comprehensive release this film has ever had. Robot Ninja, while not perfect, is a damn fun time, and I am so glad I got to see this movie cleaned up the first time I watched it, as they've really knocked the remastering for this one out of the park. It looks and sounds great, and while there is a little bit of a wobble around the casting direction and dialogue with this movie, those issues are far eclipsed by some creative and delightful cine, some really nice general direction, a kick-ass soundtrack, and a plot that's eccentric and straddles the line between gritty comic book action and hamtastic tromerisms. Definitely not one to miss. I think it's probably JR's best movie. If you can get your hands on a copy of this, do it.